Hey everybody, it's Axel Ablaze here, here with a very special video today, a huge collaboration, first one on my channel, and want to get some introductions out of the way before we get into what the topic of today's video is. So first we've got Broken Ronin.
Hey, what's up, guys? Happy to be on the channel. Happy to, talk about whatever the topic is of this collab. Happy to be here.
Being very, very mysterious with what the topic is. Clearly people didn't see the thumbnail title, so they don't know yet. Then we got King Uzumaki.
I'm just happy to be here, ready to talk about this. Do it.
Yep. Then we got Tay is the best.
Yo, what's good?
It's all good here. And then Tokyo Tron.
Yo, what's good? Happy to be here. Happy to talk about some of my favorite and questionable series on the list.
Oh yeah, there's gonna be a lot of questionable things on here, but yeah, so I've got these four guys on here because today in this video, in this very special video, we're gonna be talking about Shonen Jump world building. Because in the world of Shonen Jump and Shonen Jump adjacent stuff, some of the best series out there have absolutely immersive worlds that you just want to jump into because they're so detailed very well, or in some cases, not very well, and you kind of want to roast it, which is really what the purpose of this video is just kind of to rank things appropriately. And it's important to note here that uh, what we're ranking specifically is the world building. We're not saying necessarily that a series is good or bad, because there are some series that are absolutely fantastic, but they might be not so great on the world building side of things, or vice versa. Um, so yeah, that is what we're going to be jumping into today. We've got 43 series on the list. We've got a bunch of the current Shonen Jump titles. We've got some of the popular ones from the past. We've got a few titles from Jump Plus because they're worth talking about. Uh, yeah. And before we start too, I also want to say this is going to be one of the best sounding podcasts, or not podcasts, videos out there because everybody on this chat has a very good voice. Just wanted to say that. Just
Ooh,
giving
complimenting us
compliments to
before it
everybody.
starts. I like it.
Thank you.
Thank
Got to butter
you.
everybody up in that regard. But in all seriousness, no, I love everybody's
Thank you.
voices. All right. With that being said, we are going to jump right on into things then. So the first series that we've got on our list, and this is all in alphabetical order for those that are wondering. We've got Assassination Classroom. So I'm going to start with you, Ronan. Any thoughts on the world building in Assassination Classroom?
Now, Assassination Classroom's world building is not bad, but it is also not good. I don't know if that's like a hot take, but I think it's just serviceable as like a kind of like world building. Obviously, we get a little bit of perspective on like just how big of a threat Koro Sensei is, right? We obviously get a little bit of perspective on the world, but when it comes to series that like that their worlds take place in semi-realistic worlds, like for example, Kuro Sensei is kind of superimposed onto our world rather than us, the viewer, being taken into a new experience. I think it's hard to have extremely immersive world building in that regard. So I'd say it's fine, but considering most of the world is just how we'd expect it to be in ours, there's not a lot of depth and I think like lore and things that we could go into in this world that would be much different than ours, aside from obviously diving into Kuro Sensei's past, but I don't know if I want to dive into spoilers specifically.
No, that's fair. That is absolutely fair. So, in terms of a letter grade, then what would you give it?
I'd definitely say it's C. I'd say it's pretty much for me, along with a couple of other series, just the pinnacle of average, right? It's not like appalling by any sense of the imagination, but there's nothing about it that makes me go, this is good, or this is great in that regard.
That's fair. All right, next up, King Uzumaki.
Well, like Ronan said, Assassination Classroom, I think it's a alright series. I'd give it like a 7.5, 8 out of 10. but it just falls into one of those categories that world building isn't the focus, and even then the world is just it's just planet Earth, nothing really special. World building, kind of. I don't want to say it's ass, but like there's no point in it. So I'd say mm, I'd give it a B or a C.
That's fair. How about you, Tay?
Well, I'm not too familiar with Assassination Classroom, but from what I gathered, it's sort of similar to what the first two guys said. It's more of a character based story rather than worrying too much about like the world building and building this expansive world. It's not too focused on that, you know.
No, I would agree. So what letter grade would you give it then?
Yeah, I don't
Or
want
if
to
you want
stray
to
too far, so
if
I'll
you want
just
to
say
abstain too, there's also an option.
I'll just say like a C or abstain as well.
All right, and then how about you, Tron?
So for me, as for the series as a whole, I really enjoyed it, but as everyone else has said pretty much, it's more of a character-driven story where the world doesn't really matter. Um it's more like the world, since it is just normal humans planet Earth, it's like just serving as a background that's somewhat stagnant. Like we don't get a lot of development on what's going on other parts of the world because it doesn't really matter to the story. So for that reason, I would probably give it a D.
Gotcha, gotcha. On my end, I would definitely agree that the world building, it's not necessarily there as much. We get, some of the history about the school. We get some of the history with the characters. We get history in terms of like Koro Sensei's like assassination days and whatnot. But other than that, like you guys said, it's definitely more character driven than anything else. Um, so in that regard, like I would give it like a B or a C myself. So with that being said, if we're averaging everybody out there, that would definitely put that in the C category. And once again, just want to point out to the audience, this is not grading the series in terms of their quality as a whole. The focus on here is the world building. So while we might think that the world building for Assassination Classroom is a C, that doesn't mean that Assassination Classroom is a series is a C. So but before anyone just like sees this and like instantly is like unsubscribe, they put Assassination Classroom in C. No, it's the world building side of things. So yeah, just once again clarifying that. Next on our list, though, we've got Bakuman. So, King Uzumaki, let's start with you. What do you think about the world building in Bakuman?
Oh boy. Bakuman. I didn't completely finish the series. I got like halfway through, and overall, I think the series is all right. But again, from what I saw, it's not really the focus. It's just two dudes. I mean, I haven't caught up to the series like I said, but I don't know if later on maybe they have to go somewhere else and draw manga somewhere else. But from what I read, they're just chilling in their office drawing manga, not really going out exploring the world or anything. So I actually put this one in D.
Gotcha, gotcha. Tay, how about you?
Um, I think it kind of depends on whether you like where you're looking at the world building from, because in terms of like how deep it gets into like the manga industry as a whole, like you could class it as having good world building in that sense, you know. Um, so if we were to base it off that, then I'd base it probably a bit higher than Assassination Classroom, but it's up to everyone's interpretation of like what it's trying to build, you know.
Yeah, so I and that's something that I do want to touch on is that like when I'm talking like with my own perspective on the world building, like yes, I'm location and whatnot is definitely important, but like also considering like the just who, what, when, where, and why. Like like you said, like the Bakuman as a whole is focusing on the manga industry and does it quite a bit. So uh in my own opinion, like in that regard, because of like what we see with Shonen Jump and everything there, that's why at least me personally, I would put Bakuman as a B. Um, Tron, how about you?
So I'm gonna have to abstain for this one. I have not read Bakuman yet, so
Completely fair. And then how about you, Ronan?
All right, so kind of like how Tay and you touched on, I definitely think this does world building pretty decently. Just not in the regard of like, we're going to a bunch of different countries or places or locations. I think what it does pretty well is dive into the world of manga, if that makes sense, right? From like going from the perspective of a layman who's not really into the manga industry like that and actually reading Bakuman, it's a very informative and pretty like there are, don't get me wrong, there are some misconceptions in there, right? Obviously there's one kind of pretty infamous one in Bakuman, but for the most part a lot of the information is really helpful when analyzing or trying to make a series if that's what you're going for. And I think when we take the context of the series in terms of world building, I would still say it's not the best, right? I want to keep things contextual like in relation to others because obviously we're going to have some heavy hitters on the series. So I'd
Oh yeah,
definitely
big ones, I
say
think.
it's going to be a C, but I think it's a high C, whereas Assassination Classroom is like on the lower end or middle end. So I think it's in context, I think that's very important. Like we need to contextualize world building for the series. Not every series has to make someone go to a different planet or, whatever. I think in the context of the series, it has above average, but not hitting that B tier.
Gotcha, gotcha. Um, then I think then it's safe, at least for now. We'll put Bakuman in C tier. If we want to rearrange things later on, we can. But I will put it above Assassination Classroom. All right. So then, next up, we've got Black Clover. So I'm gonna start off with Tay on this one. Tay, what are your thoughts on the world building in Black Clover?
So again, I didn't get too far into the series of Black Clover yet, but from what I saw, which wasn't even that much, you do learn a lot about the world. You learn about like the inner workings of like all the different guilds. You learn a bit more about like the types of missions they end up going on, the different abilities. You meet a lot of characters really fast into the show, but at times it can be a bit that you don't really learn too much about each character before they move on to the next, which I guess could kind of also like fill that world building void, if you get what I mean. So it's like if actually I can't. I'll leave it there for now.
So I think you cut off on what rating you would have given it. Did you have a letter
Oh
grade for
yeah,
it?
sorry. I would put it at a higher echelon personally than the other two so far. I don't. I'd give it a B probably.
All right. How about you, Tron?
okay, so for me, I think Black Clover does a lot right in terms of world building. Um the first thing that I really like about Black Clover, well, first off, I should probably say I'm watching the anime for it. I'm on like episode 130 or something. So the one thing that I really did appreciate was the fact that the other kingdoms are now getting involved with the story. Because I was kind of concerned it would stay just within the Clover Kingdom and not expand the world more in that way. Then even some of the stuff with the very beginning of the show, I forgot the villain's name, but like the first villain, how he ends up playing a role later in the story. And then even just some of the stuff with the very, very beginning of the show and some of the history of the world, how that all comes to play a bit later in the show. I would give it, I think, a low A.
Gotcha, gotcha. I would also personally give Black Clover an A, um, because, like you mentioned, while we start off in the Clover Kingdom, as the series goes on, we start learning more and more about the other three kingdoms as well. Um, there's a lot of history to the magic in the world, with like the 3, 4, and 5 leaf clovers. There's differences in how magic is viewed and interpreted in the different kingdoms. Um, but on top of that, Black Clover has a very, very interesting history that spans, I want to say, over 1,000 years in the story. So there is a lot of stuff that is covered in Black Clover. And I think, like, as a whole, the world building in Black Clover is definitely one of its strongest points. So that's why I personally would also give it an A in that regard. Ronan, how about you?
Yeah, so when it comes to Black Clover, right, I definitely think that it's a series that's overall pretty decent with its world building and some other aspects of it standing out. Like you said, the history of Black Clover is not only pretty dense in terms of what it is. Like for me personally, I've had to go over it just to make sure I've gotten some facts with the series right. But it's not just history for the sake of, just having that history. It plays a massive part into the future and the present of all of the Clover Kingdom and several other kingdoms that exist within the Black Clover universe. I think that one thing it does really well is something that I think a lot of other shonen, new or old, sometimes fall flat on is not having interconnecting arcs. Like sometimes it'll feel like one arc kind of begins out of the blue and then it'll end out of the blue without any ramifications of that arc. Whereas I think Black Clover is a series that is able to kind of weave them together in a very natural way. It's able to kind of flow from one problem to the next problem, whether it be some devils that have been a consistent problem in the Black Clover universe that are causing consistent problems as we go throughout the series. So I definitely say, um, obviously using the context of the series, it's probably for me a low, like a pretty low A, but it's an A nonetheless.
All right, and then how about for you, King?
All right, so the thing with Black Clover, I think world building is probably one of the things it does best. Whether we're exploring a dungeon or we're going to another kingdom or maybe another realm, we haven't seen any of that yet. But every time they do something with world building, they don't miss. It's not the best in the world, but it's pretty good so far. Right now in the arc we're in right now, I'm not gonna go into too depth with spoilers, but we've been in the Heart Kingdom and we're doing some stuff. I don't know where it's gonna lead, but if it's going where I think we're gonna lead, we might have a new place to explore. And I agree with everyone else that I'd put it in an A. I give it a middle A. I don't know if I would say no. I give it a low A. Low A. It's definitely up there.
All right, sounds good. So then it sounds like we got a consensus on A. All right. So, next one up on our list is Bleach. Tron, do you got any feelings on the world building in Bleach?
Yeah, so the world building of Bleach, I think it's pretty close to perfect in terms of shonen. So I will admit that there are some things that I would have liked further explored, but I feel like those more have to do with plot than world building. The whole, I guess, aesthetic or vibe of Bleach is very consistent throughout the series. Um, it's really interesting just the essentially like how you have almost a complete other world within the world because not everyone else can see the hollows that the soul reapers and I guess like spiritually active people can in Bleach. So I think I would give it an S.
Fair enough. Me personally, Bleach has always been a series that has been close to my heart as someone that has watched it since the mid 2000s when it first came out. Uh, and I've loved everything that Kubo has done with the aesthetic that Bleach has and whatnot. Um, and like you said, it there are so many elements to it with like the human world, Soul Society, Hueco Mundo, the stuff with the Soul Reapers, the Quincy's, the Arankar, everything with it. The only thing that's keeping it from an S for me is just the fact that there were so many things that were just kind of introduced, but then just never developed upon further. Um, and whether or not, that stuff that would have been covered had Kubo been in full health, we may never know unless they decide for the anime to change things drastically, which they could if they give him enough direction. But just because there wasn't enough closure on certain elements of the world building, that's what would give it at least a high A for me. Ronan, how about you?
Before I give my take, I'm just curious, real quick. what aspects of the world building would you say were just kind of like a thread left open that like just wasn't closed completely?
Sure. So like for example, like with the Rukon guy, like when they first go to Soul Society and when they're not in the Gote 13, like we see, oh, there's this like, one location of the Rukon guy and it's just like, yeah, everyone that dies goes here and it's just like so does just everyone from the world just go to this like one Japanese section of like the Soul Society, which obviously once we get to Burn the Witch, there are obviously implications with there in terms of world building with that. Um, but there were other things with like the Soul King and whatnot that it was just like those were things that were introduced, but then just kind of left off that never got completed. Again, like overall, I think it was great, and I love Bleach. I will always love Bleach, but I think there were just some aspects of it that I wish it would have just gone a couple steps further to develop it a little bit more, and it didn't. And that's just a personal take on my end.
Yeah, I can understand that. For me, I'm somewhat of a stan of Bleach, right? As many people in this call seem to be. Bleach is, regardless of its flaws that I can obviously acknowledge, one of my favorite series of all time, and I think it's going to stay there. In terms of world building, like I said, obviously using context, it doesn't introduce a plethora of different places, but I think for the vibe that Kubo was going for, it works basically perfectly. The problems I should say with like the Rukongai and the Soul King, I don't know if we want to count this because if not, that may change my ranking a little bit. But I'm someone who's read the Can't Fear Your Own World light novels of Bleach, and a lot of that stuff, a lot of the world building and like kind of aspects of Bleach that weren't necessarily in the manga, but is kind of a continuation, cleared up and filled those gaps for me, and just doesn't lead me to having those same problems. So here's what I'll say just to make a distinction. Without the light novels, it's probably a high A for me. With light novels, because it fills in quite a bit of information on the Soul King, all that kind of stuff, I would definitely give it like a low S.
That's fair. I myself have never read the light novels yet, but I know there's a lot of cool stuff that happens in the light novels, so that definitely gives me a lot more anticipation to read them. So I will definitely consider that myself. So, well, King, how about you? What are your thoughts on world building in Bleach?
Just like everyone else, I love Bleach. Up there with one of my favorites. Not the best, but again, one of my favorites. Now, when it comes to world building, I think it definitely like we don't explore too many places, but the places that we do go to, they're pretty fun. I mean, there's some stuff that I would have liked to see more. A little nitpicks of mine, like I think the Gorgoni, I think that was called, where Ichigo was training before his fight with Aizen. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah, that little like the
In
space that
between
doesn't have
world.
time. I remember what you're talking
Yeah, I
about.
would. Oh, yeah, I would have liked to see like more places like that because kind of felt like a little out of place to me. Like it was just there. I mean, I enjoyed it, but I would have liked to see a lot more places like that. With the Soul Society, I think we got to see not everything the Soul Society had to offer, but what we did get to see, I was pretty satisfied with Waco Mundo. Waco Mundo sounds like a place that would be really cool, but when you really look at it, it doesn't look like there's too much. Kind of just like a desert. But yeah, I haven't read the light novels. I actually plan to read the light novels pretty soon, but yeah, I'd give Bleach an A when it comes to world building.
All right, and then Tay, how about you?
Everyone in the call is probably gonna hate me, but I've never watched Bleach yet, so I'm gonna have to abstain from
I
this one.
gasp.
Yeah. I yeah, I don't honestly Bleach Fire. I would recommend as a just my personal preference reading it. I think the anime can't do justice to Tite Kubo's art, but that's just my personal opinion. If you were to ever get into it, but yeah,
Yeah, I most definitely will one day. It's just I haven't got around to it yet, but I will definitely read it.
Not to mention you don't have to deal with the filler that a lot of people don't
Oh,
really like in
Animes,
Bleach.
the anime censors a lot of stuff too.
Yeah, that does. That does. So, all right. Okay. So there was a kind of a balance between S and A. You know what? For the sake of it, I'll put it in S so far. I'm willing to do that. It was part of the big three. I can put it in S.
Love to see it.
All right. And then next up, which will definitely not go into S, is Boruto. So, Ronan, you want to start
Mm,
us off
I
on
like it. I
Boruto?
like it. All right, all right. So let me be fair first. I'll get into let me be fair first, right? To say that Boruto doesn't have any world building is just wrong, right? It obviously builds upon Naruto and some of the things that we've seen in late Shippuden, but the problem is more of a question of quantity versus quality. It does, quote unquote, a lot, right? It adds a lot of information about the Otsutsuki, Kaguya, Momoshiki, Ishiki, all these characters, right? That we didn't know about or didn't know that much about, right? But the problem is in the context of a series like Boruto, right? Disregarding Naruto, because I understand Boruto is a different series taken in a different direction. In the context of Boruto as a series, I don't think it's executed very well. Case in point, a lot of the world building comes from contradictions from the previous series, which, ignoring that fact, right? A lot of the world building is just boring to see. We don't really see these expansive historical moments. We don't see these very interesting, intricately designed places. What we see is blobs of text that are telling us and telling me, wow, look at this interesting thing that happened 1,000 years in the past that we don't get to see in any way, shape, or form, right? And sure, well, conceptually, I genuinely think a lot of the things Boruto tries to do is cool. I think the whole karma aesthetic and like the aspect of where the Otsutsuki can jump from body to body and the whole god tree thing, a lot of stuff that are just dove into in the manga on a conceptual level is great. I think that could be really, it could be really cool, but it's in its execution where I think it falls pretty flat. And I know I want to make this clear. I know Boruto isn't Naruto, but it is a continuation of the world that we've already established. And I think that Boruto, whereas it shoots for the moon, definitely falls back to earth crashing pretty hard. So I'd say this for me is my first D tier of or first D world building of the list.
That's fair. That is completely fair. King, how about you? What are your thoughts on Boruto's world building?
Alright, before I get into the world building, I just have a quick message to all the Boruto fans. Alright. Your series had the potential to reach for the stars, but it kind of barely touched the ceiling. Alright. Now onto the world building.
That was so deep right there.
It's a personal quote of mine. Alright, but alright. Alright. When it comes to the world building of Boruto, most of the world building in there, it kind of plays like I said about like maybe like 25% of it is its own original stuff at all, and the other half is just they build off of what they had in Naruto, and 50% of the time they do it well, and 50% of the time they do it bad. So let's just put it where we all know it belongs. Let's not beat around the bush. D tier.
All right. Terry, how about you?
Oh, I really love Boruto from a place of nostalgia. But I do think that Ronan and King hit the nail on the head in the sense of like it does have its own little bits of world building here and there, but for the most part, it just feels like they're all sort of like little rehashes of things that Naruto had already set in stone. Like at the end of Shippuden, you had Kaguya, and she's like the big bad of the series. And then suddenly there was a secret guy in the shadows with Ishiki that she came to Earth with. And then also with regards to like the karma, it's kind of along the same lines of like Orochimaru's curse mark, in that it's just a mark that will eventually consume you and allow the holder or the person that placed it on you to just take over your body. Like it doesn't strive for originality with its world building is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I you got to put it in D tier, I think.
All right, Tron, how about you?
So for me, it's kind of hard to rank Boruto, and I think it's probably quite difficult to rank many sequels because we have to separate what Naruto already introduced, which like obviously helps the world building of Boruto because it is in the same world. And then I have to separate that from what Boruto added. And all Boruto has added are plot holes, inconsistencies, and for me personally, I think the introduction of Kaguya was probably the worst thing in the original Naruto series. And the fact
Facts.
that Boruto chooses to only expand on the Otsutsuki clan is pretty trash. Um, I think I would have to agree with everyone else and just put Boruto in D tier as a series and world building.
Fair enough, fair enough. I mean, not beating around the bush, I would also put it in D tier. Because like you said, just separating it from Naruto, they decided to expand upon the worst part of Naruto Shippuden, which was Kaguya. The all of a sudden, oh hey, there's a bigger bad than the other two big bads that we've already been building up to this entire time. Um, and like even excluding the Kaguya and the Otsutsuki stuff, uh, what Boruto was first attempting to do was to take kind of like a scientific evolution on the world of Naruto, and like they kind of like treaded the waters with it, but never really dove into it, which I thought was a shame. Like if you're gonna introduce it, like really try and go into it, and they didn't. And the evil organization that they've got in this series doesn't hold a candle to the Akatsuki whatsoever. Like even now, I'm still confused as to why they're even all there. Like it's Boruto could have been great, but it feels like it's just wanting to rehash certain things from the original series. So
And
yeah,
and
I'm gonna.
one thing I wanted to just quickly say before we move on is I so when it comes to judging series, right? I don't like to judge it on what it could have been, right? A big pet peeve of mine is when someone, just to use My Hero as an example, is like My Hero would have been better if Deku didn't have a quirk and was like Batman, right? One, you don't know that, and two, it wouldn't make sense with the world that they built. So I would like to evaluate Boruto based on what it does do, right? And I just want to make clear for the audience, because this is, I think, is all what we mean. I just want to make it explicit. We are not saying it has bad world building just because it expands upon the Otsutsuki. It still has the potential to make Kaguya retroactively either a good motivated villain or just make the Otsutsuki as a clan cool, right? It has that possibility. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. As of right now, though, in the avenue it's decided to pursue wholeheartedly, it is not executing it correctly, regardless of the premise, regardless of like what your thoughts are on the idea of building off the Otsutsuki. Even if we say that that premise is perfectly fine, it hasn't done it well. It doesn't make it interesting, it doesn't make it intriguing, and it doesn't give us extra knowledge that we care about. At least in my opinion, I don't care. Like one thing I will say is the karma was cool, right? I mentioned that earlier, but everything else is just like really borderline boring and just spewing facts at me that really nobody cares about. Like I don't want to know that. Like it's just really just dry and boring, and I think that's one of the worst things you can do when you're trying to expand the universe of your series.
Yeah, I think that was really well put. I definitely agree with that. Like and I do want to say this too. Just because Boruto is a thing does not tarnish the legacy that Naruto left behind. Um, like Naruto is still a great series, and that's why it is still important to make that distinguish Naruto from Boruto. Just because Boruto is a thing does not make Naruto any less great. Like it was still a fantastic series. So yeah. All right. Should we shall we move on then to our other
Another
potential
series. Let's go.
D or potentially new lower ranking? Build King. King, you want to start us off?
Gladly. Alright. For a series with build in the name, their world building sure is fucking ass, I mean. Oh boy. I don't even know where to start with this series. Is this still being published?
Yeah, it
I
is.
think so.
I mean, it's not even at 10 chapters yet. Like, so
Ah,
it's not at
I,
that point where it can be canceled yet, unless
I
like
don't
the
need
author
10
does something
chapters.
awful.
I don't, you don't even need 10 chapters. I read the first and God damn it. I mean, with Build King, okay, like it's in the name, they build, but they can't build the world. Simple as that. D tier. Let's get this one over with.
All right, Tay, how about you?
Like Bill King was one chapter was enough for me. Like the what I saw in that chapter, especially with like the creatures and the world that they built, it feels like some kind of like love letter to Super Mario, but in a really poor taste. That's like all the creatures and the whole premise. It's just so wacky. It's too wacky for its own good. I feel the world building didn't like the world building was supposed to be its saving grace, and it just wasn't. So it's definitely a D tier for me.
All right, Sean, how about you?
So for me, I've read every chapter of Build King so far. Um, I think that
How?
normally, yeah, it was a struggle, but
I've also read all of it, so I know where you're going.
yeah. So normally, when you start a series out, I'd say even though there's only not too many chapters yet, in most other series, you get a decent understanding of what the world's like. And in general, I think everything looks cool. Like aesthetically, it's pleasing, but beyond that, there's really not a lot of substance. And besides just that, this is one thing, maybe you guys feel differently, but I just think the intro, the very first page of the manga just made me want to drop it. It's so cringy. Like they're trying to be super dramatic about something that doesn't matter. Like the introduction is them saying behind every one of these buildings is a builder. No one cares. That's all I have to say about that. No one we know that someone had to build every building that exists, but beyond that, I would put it in D tier.
That's fair. That's fair. I would also put it in D tier. And as someone that has read all of Toriko, which is hands down a much better series than Build King, Build King is literally a Toriko clone, but way worse. Like, way worse. Like, at least in Toriko's, like, in favor of it, like, it had way cooler main characters in Toriko compared to what we have for Build King. And not that the characters should necessarily matter on the world building side of things, but the fact that we've got such a carbon copy but worse version of Toriko, no, it's bad. Boruto at least tries. Build King, it does not. So I would definitely put it in D tier as well. Ronan, how about you? Do you want to finish off this roast of Build King?
Yeah. So listen, I would hate to assess a series without doing my due diligence, right? So I forced myself to read Build King, right? It was painful. It was like stabbing myself in my brain because of how painful it was. And me being slightly hyperbolic aside, here is why I think systematically its world building does not work, right? For one, right, in order to be interested in the world, you need to be partially interested in the characters that occupy it. We're not, first off, right? The premise in and of itself, while technically unique, is not interesting, right? It's not intriguing, which is fine. You can make premises that are not inherently good by your writing, right? For example, I don't care about volleyball. I love Haikyuu to death, right? Haikyuu made me care about a sport that I had never once thought of. Build King is not able to do a similar thing with building. It's boring. It comes off as boring. And that leads me to my third thing. I don't want to come off as like a meathead who can't read a lot, right? Like I've read late Hunter x Hunter where there are complete pages and pages of exposition off the wall. But there's something about Build King that is so boring with how much text. Like it's like the text to interesting actual thing happening is like 100 to 1, right? For every 100 bubbles of dialogue I see, I get about one nugget of something that interests me in the slightest, right? And even that, I may be giving Build King a little bit too much, a little too much credit, right? The world is just so dry, right? We get it. You build. Now expand on that. What is interesting about your story besides the fact that you build things, right? I understand that's your core premise and that's okay, but it doesn't build around that, ironically enough, in an interesting way, in a funny way. Like I understand the sentiment that is really goofy, and it is, but it's not funny. It's not intriguing. It's not engaging. And if the first chapter, right? Usually I'm pretty understanding of first chapters. I'm like, you're just getting started. I get it. But if the first chapter not only made me want to just not read it immediately, but completely drop it and never read it unless I'm actually doing it for the sake of a video, I feel like that's very indicative of the quality of your writing. Take this all with a grain of salt, right? Build King has just started. Maybe miraculously from chapter 9 on, if the series even continues, it'll be great, right? In fact, I hope it's great. I never hope that a manga does bad or sucks, right? I enjoy reading good stuff. Build King, however, I did not enjoy. It to sum it all up, right? You could say structurally it works very poorly, and that is understandable. But from a core standpoint, from the just the deepest part of my soul, I found it terribly boring and actually annoying to read.
Yeah, I think that sums it up really well.
Before we move on, I'd like to share some Build King facts with you all. I like to do my research when it comes to certain series. So, as before we were preparing for this, I looked up some Build King facts, right? Number one, there are more Sakura fans than there are Build King.
Ooh,
That's a nice
ooh,
statistic.
Interesting.
that's a low number right there.
Hey, did you also know there are more people that think Boruto is better than Naruto than there are people who think Build King was interesting? That's
Hmm,
actually a
that's
scientific fact.
Yeah.
And there's only
uh,
about 10 of them as well.
all right. And here's another one. According on if we go on BuzzFeed, top 10 tips to help you fall asleep. Reading Build King ranks number one. Fascinating. Oh,
Are you
that's
sure
cool.
that
That's
didn't
cool.
rank number one in putting you into a coma? Because I think that's gonna be a stronger reaction for Build King. So
Oh
You know
boy.
what the
yeah.
worst thing is the fact that we're all trashing this, but like the Toriko stands are probably gonna go hard at it. It's gonna end up running for like 50
Ooh,
plus chapters.
let me
So like the
speak on that
17 Toriko
real
fans.
real quick. One thing I want to say. If you have to defend your series by saying one of two things, right? I get it. I understand not every series can jump off right at the gate and be amazing from the start. I get it. I'm understanding. I'm sympathetic. But if you have to tell me to wait, really 30 plus chapters is like where I start to draw the line, right? And I feel like I'm on the nicer end of the spectrum. If there is no promise that far, it's bad. And if you, this is actually something someone commented under one of my videos for when I talked about it. If you have to say, right, that it's good if you read Toriko, I don't I don't care. I don't care if your manga is good if I have to read another manga. Like I'm not trying to do background research on the mangaka before I read a new series. It's just a manga has to be able to stand on its own in the world building aspect, especially for a series that is so heavily built. I keep finding myself saying Build King puns built upon just the world building. Like Build King is easily interpreted as a series that is heavily reliant on that. And for it to suck at a fundamental level with that is just really disappointing.
But that's the thing. Like you shouldn't have to say that, oh, if you're a Toriko fan, you'll like it. Because if you're a Toriko fan, you should be disappointed that it's such a lackluster carbon copy of Toriko. That is not a good argument. Like, no, that's like the farthest thing. Like, Toriko fans should not be happy that, like, this is what we get next. Like, don't get me wrong, compared to even more of this author's content, this is still better than them. But even then, like, no, Build King is just, it's not good. It's not.
And there's some reverse psychology, you know? If you really love something, you have to let it go. If you really hate something, you gotta hold on to it. You know, it's I feel like some of these fans are. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
all
fair.
right,
All right,
all right. I don't want
let's
to move
cleanse the
on.
palate here. Uh Next up we got Burn the Witch. So Tay, do you have any thoughts on the world building in Burn the Witch?
Now with Burn the Witch, I heard it was kind of set in the Bleach world, so I didn't jump onto that until I was planning on reading Bleach. So I haven't read any of Burn the Witch yet.
Yeah, now that you mention it, like, because I remembered, like, after saying, Tay, what are your thoughts on this? I remembered that you said you didn't read Bleach, and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry for putting you in that spot right away. But no, that's fair. Tron, do you have any thoughts on Burn the Witch?
Well, it's only 4 chapters as of now, but within those 4 chapters, I really enjoyed everything that we got. I think that conceptually, the whole idea of Burn the Witch, even though it is very similar to Bleach, I think it's done in a way that's still unique to the series. So the one thing that I wish was expanded more on Bleach, even though I did love Bleach, was like the whole idea of these hollows, how they interacted with the human world. And I like how Burn the Witch just goes into a lot more detail about that. Um, it is only 4 chapters. I think I would put it at A tier for now. It could go higher or lower based on how the rest of the series unfolds.
That's fair. Me personally, and I'm going to count the one shot as well to put it at 5 because the stuff in the one shot does set up the stuff in the limited series. So it's not like things are necessarily like repeated or edited from where the one shot was. Um, I like what they've done so far with Burn the Witch. I like that it is an alternative uh, view on Bleach, like you mentioned, Tron. Um, I will say that in typical Kubo style, he dropped a bunch of really cool, really fresh looking characters on us um, as just a tease to be like, hey, guess what? I'm gonna introduce these guys, and you're gonna have to like wait like a year or something to find out more about them. And I'm just like, darn you, Kubo, not again. But I think the stuff that it introduced has been very good so far. Um, just because it has been more of a tease more than anything else so far. That's where I would kind of put it at either A or B. I'm leaning a little bit more toward B myself, just because there hasn't been more exposition yet. But I think that it's still really interesting, especially if we interpret it as a continuation of Bleach. But even then, since we've had other series where we're like, okay, we got to separate these on its own merit, I would put it at a B. I think. Ronan, how about you?
All right. So, I mean, first of all, Taite Kubo wrote it. So, I mean, automatic S. No, but in all seriousness, separating Burn the Witch from the Bleach universe is kind of like Boruto in the sense it's kind of difficult. Is whereas it's not necessarily following the same cast, it is directly like linked to it, right? Or at least it's very, very heavily hinted to be linked to the series, right? If not outright. So separating that, I think Burn the Wish is really cool, right? So far, I think it's more in its conceptual phase. I think it's kind of hard to give it a solid like pinpoint just because right now, what Kubo has done is what Kubo does best. Well, besides designing characters, give us a bunch of really amazing ideas and concepts. And now I think like where it continues from there is really gonna decide where it goes. I think it has the potential, just like Bleach, to be S. But I think so far, in order, like in the air of fairness, I think I would be good to put it at a solid B because the concepts are amazing. They're really great. But I don't think it should go in the same tier as something like Black Clover, which has been established and using its history and all of those things for so long just yet.
That's fair. And King, how where would you put it?
Well, of course, as you know, I am an expert on Bird the Witch. That being because I haven't read it, but, 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 I heard there were dragons. I don't know if that's true or not. Someone confirm that?
That is true. There are dragons.
Then it's a S. Alright. Alright, jokes aside, B tier.
I think that's fair. I think once we get more of it, I think we can potentially readdress this tier list in the future. But I think putting it in B right now is definitely worthy of it. So I think that's good. All right, the next one, Chainsaw Man. Tron, do you have thoughts on the world building of Chainsaw Man?
Okay. So before I get into the world building, the one thing that I just have to say from the bottom of my heart, fuck Makima. Also, if you
Yes.
like her, like if you think she's best girl, waifu, whatever, you need a mental evaluation. You can say aesthetically, whatever, but nah. Okay. Just wanted to put that out there. And now
There's
for
some
the
masked man brownie points right
yeah,
there. Well
yeah.
done. Well done.
And now for the world building. I mean, again, just like some of the other series, I do really enjoy the world building in Chainsaw Man, but I wouldn't say that that is the focus of the show. But I think that from what we get, everything is done well, and the whole, I guess, mood, vibe, whatever you want to call it, of the show is very consistent, and it serves to help benefit the plot and benefit the story rather than hinder it. So I would give it, I'm deciding between a A or a B. I think probably a B.
All right, that is I would definitely say that is fair. Um I too would agree that definitely the focus for Chainsaw Man, at least in this first part, was definitely more on the character interactions. Um and other than the character interactions, the other big thing was the focus on the history of Chainsaw Man and the Chainsaw Devil. That was really one of the big focuses of how uh, Chainsaw Man was the hero of hell, and he had such a big influence on the other devils of this world, where so many would fear him, many of them would revere him. Um, and obviously the control devil wanted to control him. But I also thought on the history side of things, one of the interesting things that got mentioned was that there were certain aspects of history that were represented by devils that were erased from the world because Chainsaw Man destroyed them. I thought that was an incredibly interesting aspect of the world building in Chainsaw Man. Um, but past that, and again, even then, it's still more of a character focus. The world building hasn't necessarily been established as much in Chainsaw Man. That might change once we get into part two, but for the time being, I definitely agree that like the world building would definitely be more of a. I think I would say high B. I think I would say high B. Ronan, what do you think?
Okay, so for Chainsaw Man, right, up until a certain point, I would feel like it was pretty painfully average. Like, it takes place, obviously, in kind of a superimposed version of our world, right? Obviously, you have to take into account the devils and things like that. I do think in the context of handling devils and the different associations across the entire world that were supposed to handle them was done pretty well. Although I wouldn't say that in and of itself was done enough to put it into B tier. I would say that until Makima had the line where she said, "Do you remember what?" You might have to blur that out. My bad. Um, and and the guy she's talking to responds with just a question, and I'm like, "Oh my god, oh my god, is that really what happened?" Like the I now the execution obviously I think is another one of those like really conceptual things that you have to take into account. If this were to be expanded on in part two in any way, shape, or form, like the world is just fundamentally different because some of these massive tragedies, like nuclear weapons, they don't exist anymore. Like, like there's these massive world altering things that would change history for, I don't know if it'd be the better or worse for some of these things, but some of these things are just insane, right? Like, and for Chainsaw Man and Tatsuki Fujimoto to kind of just drop that out there, I feel like bumped it up immediately to a B for me. Like, that was just such a cool concept that I think it pushes it above being its average kind of just, it takes place in the real world, to being a solid B.
That's fair. King, how about you?
Alright. Now, when I caught up to Chainsaw Man, there was just always one question on my mind that I would just stay awake at night and just ponder. That question is, why does Makima have such a fat ass?
Oh my god.
We're talking about best girl in Chainsaw Man? Hello? Huh? Hello? Is this thing on?
Right?
Y'all agree?
Yeah. Okay.
Nah, I'm
Yeah.
joking. I don't want the masked
Sure.
man.
Yeah.
Or Asura.
Uh-huh.
I don't want Asura to kill me.
He's
Yeah,
coming for
so
you.
Yeah, he's got that new persona now. He's on smoke. He's on smoke.
he changed his name. He hunting names now, but it's cool. But nah, jokes aside, I actually think the world building in Chainsaw Man is actually really solid, and I think part two has the potential to make it even greater. Cause like when we went to hell, I really like that stuff. I kind of zoned out for most of it, but yeah, I really like that stuff. And in part two, if we go to hell and search for power, then I think we could be looking at a nice fat A-tier world building series. But for now, I'm either willing to put it on a high B or low A.
All right. And then Tay, how about you?
Yeah, again, I do think it's another one. It's very like character driven. Obviously there are some like a lot of aspects of world building as well. I feel like a lot of what I would say about it has been said, so I'll go more or less quicker to my verdict. I think it's got better world building than like a C tier, definitely. Um, I think Black Clover, from what I've seen of that one, has much more solid world building. So I would probably put it in the B.
All right. Then we will put Chainsaw Man in B. Um, I'm gonna put it above Burn the Witch, since we've got some people saying, higher B. Uh, again, we could change this later on if people want to, but I think in fairness, just because Burn the Witch was also 4 chapters in one shot compared to Chainsaw Man, I think we can keep that there for now. All right. Next one we've got on our list is Death Note. And for me, this is actually the one series that I technically know the least about. So while Tay might not have watched or read Bleach, I have not fully watched or read Death Note personally.
Yeah, I was gonna say don't start on me for
No,
this one
no.
either, because I'm in the
I'm
same boat as
so I'm
you.
gonna I'm gonna
Bro,
start
those
on
are
this
cold
because
classic.
I know. I believe me, I know. I've read everything else that the author and artist combo has done, um, but I just have not gotten to that point with Death Note. So
See,
what? Oh, sorry. What were you gonna say, Tay?
I was just gonna say, in terms of like, yeah, like they definitely are classics, and that's why I would put more time for them than, like, for instance, like if I know that something is as well beloved worldwide as something like Bleach or Death Note, then I'm not gonna just jump on it on like a whim, you know?
Yeah, I get what you mean.
If I could do that for another series, yeah. So like for like them ones, that's why I haven't really got onto them yet. More because I wanna, give it the time it deserves.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. I'm of a similar mindset. There are several classics that I have not read yet, and that I fully intend to do so, but I want to give them their time. So that being said, though, I did get my take from my girlfriend who has watched all of Death Note. Um, and from what she said, like, there's not necessarily a whole lot on the world building side for Death Note. Obviously, the main focus for Death Note is everything going on with Light and L and Light's father and whatnot. So and a lot of the stuff that takes place is just in modern day Japan. Um, there are the Shinigamis and there's the Shinigami world, but from what I heard, it's not like they necessarily go that in depth with the Shinigami world. And I mean, even Ryuk coming to the human world and giving the or putting his death note out there was out of boredom and whatnot. So uh, I I would put Death Note based on that information in like a B or C tier. Again, Death Note is a really great series. I will acknowledge that, even though I have not fully watched or read it. It is a very great series, but the world building is not the focus so much in Death Note compared to the character interactions. So I will take that hot take or not hot take and leave it at that. Ronan, have you watched or read Death Note and have a better take than I do?
Yeah, so I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a better take, but I definitely have read and reread the series a couple of times because it was, in all honesty, probably like for me, the way I consume series, it went Dragon Ball, Naruto, Bleach, Death Note. So Death Note has like a special place in my heart because it was like the first non-battle oriented like series I got into, right? And I will say that in a conventional sense, its world building is pretty lackluster, right? I would agree that it doesn't go to very many places and things like that, but the way I think it builds its world, like in the context of the series, is through the Death Note and the rules that it has to follow or that the user have to follow. I think it's pretty intricate in the sense like the rules are used to various degrees, right? Sometimes you have like vague rules being taken advantage of, and sometimes you see like Light pull off these crazy strategies that can only be abused correctly if you would like seen the rules and thought of dozens of strategies on how to use them, right? So I think from that standpoint, it is done pretty well. You're right, the Shinigami world isn't really like delved into in depth, right? But I don't really think that's like anything to subtract from the series. It's not really necessary to the story and the plot that it's trying to tell. I think overall, I'd probably give it a solid B. It is the lowest B for me personally. I think it's like solidly below them, but I do think it does more for its world than something like Bakuman or Assassination Classroom. And before I just like finish my thing, I think one thing it also handles really well is the aftermath of L's, not L's, Light's work, right? Like how the world changes, how crime actually goes down and decreases, and how that's focused on and even touched upon it by some of the characters. I think is really well done and executed. So I'd say give it a solid B, just at the lowest end for all of these.
Fair enough. All right, King, how about you?
Uh, I pretty much agree with everything that Ronan said. I mean, I mean, are we including one? Because before, like when I just read Death Note, I'd give it probably like a C. But after reading the one shot that came out about a year ago, I'd pump it up to a low B. Because well, we're not really like looking at the world in the aspect. We're looking at like certain elements of the world, like again the rules of the Death Note, and in the one shot we got to see kind of how like a little bit about how the Shinigami realm works and how like the kid whose name I forgot, kind of how like he thought he was just gonna beat the system, and then like the ruler of the Shinigami was like, oh no, fuck that. Like he rewrote the rules so like he would get fucked over. I just kind of I love that shit. I give it like a low B. Death Note did kind of pop my anime cherry, so that's a special place in my heart.
Fair enough. And then Tron, what do you think?
So for me, first off, I just want to say I really love Death Note as a series overall. Um, but Death Note is really all about the competition between Light and L. And I will say that the author does manage to perfectly use the setting in the world. I feel that um it's more like you have Light and L going directly against each other, and the whole world itself is just pawns to their game that they're playing. So in that aspect, I think Death Note's world building is fantastic because it shows how each of the characters are using the world basically to get their own goals. And it also does show like the long-term effects that it has, especially even still in the one shot. But the one thing that I would say about Death Note is I feel like it could happen almost anywhere. And that's the one thing that's knocking down the world building for me. Just the fact that even though yes it did happen in Japan, I feel like the competition between Light and L would still be very enjoyable to watch no matter what the setting was. I think I would probably put it at the bottom of B.
All right, then to the bottom of B it goes. All right. All right, then after Death Note, we have another potentially contentious series. We've got Demon Slayer. Ronan, what are your thoughts on the world building in Demon Slayer?
All right, all right, all right. Demon Slayer is one of those series that I think is like enjoyable, but it's in its execution of everything, besides the characters and some of the themes that the villains go through, right? Everything else seems kind of like painfully meh and average, I think. Like it's like, don't get me wrong, it's really like fun to watch, right? Or read. But I think if we're looking at the execution of its world building, it's pretty lackluster. Like I would say the extent of the world building goes to like a historical sense where we see Muzan, we see like I don't want to spoil for like anime onlys, but I'll just say like we see some of the confrontations that led to Muzan being the character that he is now. And yes, while I understand that having that historical aspect is part of world building, and while yes, that I think that is done pretty well, if that's the only aspect of world building that I think is done to any varying degree well, I think it's just not very great at building its world in general, right? I think for Demon Slayer, for the world that it's in, it does fine. It gets its job done. But I don't think Demon Slayer was really aiming to do anything more than that, at least in terms of its world building. It needed a way to facilitate the plot, right? Demons are a problem across the world, and it gave us a little bit of history and backstory to that. I think it's not bad. It's certainly not a D tier. It's no Build King or Boruto, but I don't think it's also using its world to its fullest extent. And I don't know if that's a hot take since I've never really talked to people about Demon Slayer world building, but I'd say it's probably a C, being in between Bakuman and Assassination Classroom.
All right, fair enough. King, what are your thoughts on the world building in Demon Slayer?
Um, Pretty lackluster, if I do say so myself. In the original, like, world building, it's not the focus pretty much at all. And I don't want to go into what ifs, but in the back of my mind, it would have been interesting to see, like, let's say like Nahasha or like the Demon Slayer Corps or whatever, like, after they just like defeat Muzan, like, before they like before the stuff with Muzan happens, let's say they just like there was like an arc where they just like, what, let's just like go around the world and see what other demons are like, maybe stronger demons that aren't connected to Muzan. Like, I know it doesn't kind of make sense, but I thought something like that would have been cool to see. But from what we did see, it was just, what's the word I'm looking for? Ash? No, 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 no. Ash. Just bad. It could have, it had the potential in like the back row to use some of its world building the little world building that it did have. It could have used it to make something of itself, but it didn't. And so I'd put it right at the middle of C.
All right, that's fair. That might be a hotter take than Ronan's, but we'll see. We'll see. Tay, what are your thoughts on Demon Slayer?
I kind of agree with King. Like, with Demon Slayer, I feel like I've watched it quite a few times over. Every single time, like, I want to love the series so much, but there's just this like niggling feeling in my brain that like it's just the most okay show I've ever watched or read. In terms of world building, everything has this sort of nostalgia to it, not in the good sense, more in the sense that like I feel like I've seen another series do that with a bit more detail. You know what I mean? It doesn't do anything, especially in world building. It doesn't do anything necessarily bad. It's just so like, all right, okay. Uh, I'd say you have to put it like right in the middle of C for that sense, because it's so not great and not bad at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's completely fair. And Tron, what do you think?
So I think that I view world building slightly differently. So while I do get all the stuff about expanding on history and just a lot of the other aspects that we didn't get too much of in Demon Slayer, I also find it kind of hard to separate world building specifically from some of the character interactions and moments that we had, and also just like how demons work in the story in general. I will say that the problem with Demon Slayer for me is it does everything okay. It's like the author had this general idea of where they wanted the story to go. It hit everything and it did almost the bare minimum in a sense. Like nothing was really too expanded on or too in depth to a point that would make me want to put it in A tier or even S tier. But nothing was abysmal like Boruto or Build King. So I pretty much agree with everyone and I would put it in the middle of C tier.
That's fair. I like Demon Slayer myself. I will say that. Like I enjoyed the ride with Demon Slayer for the most part. Was it anything like groundbreaking? Absolutely not. Like everyone said, like it's one of those things where it's average, but it does average very well. If it didn't do average very well, it would not have sold as much as it did. Although I think we can all agree that Studio Ufotable is
Hard
majorly
carry.
responsible, yes, exactly, for making Demon Slayer as great as it is. Not saying that the art in the manga of Demon Slayer is bad, but
It is bad.
Ufotable just made magic happen with that animation. So,
They always do. They
and
always.
they always do. You're right. I do like the history with the Hashiras and Muzan and the upper moon and the lower moon. Um, but I do agree that there's definitely more that could have been done with it. Um, so I will definitely put it in the middle of C, like everyone else said. I'm not gonna stray from the pack in this regard. And if there are any Demon Slayer fans that were watching this video up to an hour in, uh, they're gone.
That's rough, buddy.
They're gone. Even well, assuming that they made it into an hour in. So we'll see what the YouTube metrics are on this video.
It's gonna show up on like your analytics. Like at this point in the video, everyone just stopped.
Everyone,
Everyone left.
everyone and their grandma
So
stopped
the Demon
watching
Slayer is
right here.
peak fiction. The world building is amazing. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Bro, it's sales. It sold a lot, so it's objectively good. What? Come on now.
Obviously, but One Piece is trash.
It
Obviously,
has
the
demon
logic
in the
doesn't.
main, so
The logic.
therefore the demons mean top world building.
Oh,
Ye-
yeah.
I mean, not to sidetrack the conversation too much, but one thing that always kind of annoyed me about Demon Slayer is even though I do like the animation a lot, I feel like any other anime, if it got that ufotable treatment, it would do
Oh,
so much better than
100%.
Demon Slayer did. Like any other anime.
I think
100%.
I
If
think a prime
Black
example of
Clover,
that is Jujutsu Kaisen. Like I don't I just want to say this, right? I was pretty confident after I saw God of High School and how that looked. I was like, "Oh yeah, Jujutsu Kaisen getting animated by this studio? Oh, so it's going to be cuz the thing is, right? It's not doing Demon Slayer numbers like how it was in its peak, right? But you start to look at the trends Jujutsu Kaisen is kind of heading towards, and you start to see, wow, it's almost like if a even barely decent anime gets a good animation studio that looks good, it'll sell amazingly. So yeah,
You know,
I
one
definitely,
100%.
yeah.
could you
Yeah.
imagine if Black Clover was handled by Studio Ufotable
Oh,
instead of Studio Pierrot?
That would probably be like top 1 in sales
Yeah.
or whatever metrics. Like,
It's something I always say. Demon Slayer got super fucking lucky that Ufotable did the anime. Because if fucking Studio Period was out here doing their anime, bro.
Listen, I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to try to detract from the success. I don't want that to be misconstrued to be what any of us are saying. All I'm saying, right, is if Demon Slayer, the series, the source material threw the ball, right, it threw an alley oop, and Studio Ufotable just kind of helped, right? It was just there with the assist. Like, I
It,
mean,
it finished the dunk.
yeah. I mean, it's not to say that any series with good animation can have done that, right? I'm not trying to take anything away from it, nor am I saying that Demon Slayer is completely carried by its animation, right? I will say it's an undeniable fact that the animation elevates the quality of the series, though.
I can't wait for Bill King to
Mm.
get animated by Ufotable.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's gonna
crazy.
prove it's gonna prove us all wrong.
It's gonna be anime of the year. It's gonna break every
Literally.
record in
The
the Crunchyroll
decade. What are you
Awards.
talking about? The decade.
Oh my god. Anyway, getting back
Like, can you
on
imagine
track.
like the particle effects that will be flying everywhere when that guy swings his hammer and destroys that monster at the end of the first episode? Oh my
Bro, the
gosh.
sweat going down his face is just gonna look better than all of Black Clover. Wow.
While his
Literally.
brother is crying in the corner and like the soundtrack rises up by Lisa and
Oh my gosh.
Build the wall. Oh wait.
anyway, moving on to a series that is near and dear to my heart, mainly because I ripped the character for my own purposes on my channel. We've got Hard-Boiled
Uh-oh.
Cop and Dolphin. I'm ready, boys, for you to just rip into this one if you want to. So, King, do you have any thoughts on Hard-Boiled Cop and Dolphin?
Well, luckily for you, I actually haven't read this series. However, from what I do hear, it's actually actually I haven't heard anything particularly bad about it. I've heard it's alright. So I'm just gonna skip this one and pass it over to Ty.
Tay,
Hey, Tay.
have you read this one, Tay?
A few chapters. Wait, first off, are we not doing Dr. Stone? Because we were doing alphabetically.
Holy
and
crap!
obviously H comes after D.
Oh wait, no, I've got it. It's so it loaded it based on how I saved the file name. So Dr. Stone is on there. It's next to the Promised Neverland and Spy Family.
Okay.
So
It doesn't matter whether we do it now or later.
well, that
I,
being
it
said,
just
YouTuber
suddenly.
making a mistake? Impossible.
Oh my
oh,
gosh.
yeah,
I
'cause
don't mean to come onto your channel and
Yeah.
start like causing drama, but
Oh
Nah,
no,
I'm joking.
I saved my images not alphabetically. Yeah,
what
I
is this
saved this one as
production
Dolphin,
value?
that's why.
Unsub.
Yeah.
Unsubscribe.
But nah, I've read a few chapters. From what I've read, in terms of world building, I don't think it's like there, but it may have like improved in that. But I would like to say, since it's a near and dear series to your heart, I did enjoy what I read, and I do plan on going back to it. I did enjoy it. I thought it was really funny, actually. It was one of the few like gag manga that I actually found really funny.
Well, I appreciate that. You get brownie points for that.
Thank you.
Alright, Tron, do you have any thoughts on Cop and Dolphin?
So, just like Uzumaki, I have not read this. In fact, I haven't even heard of this until I found your channel. But I'll definitely give it a shot since you guys have such good things to say about it. So I'll abstain.
All right. Okay. So as someone who has read it, I'm laughing here. Okay, so just for some context, Hard-Boiled Cop and Dolphin is by the same author, Ryuhei Tamura, as Beelzebub, which ran in the magazine about 5-ish years ago. But that being said, that is not an argument to say, Hard-Boiled Cop and Dolphin is only good if you've read Beelzebub. Cough, cough.
I was about to
Don't
bring
think-
up that Bill King reference.
Yeah, no, it's not like that at all. It's its own separate thing. So Hard-boiled
I
cop
really
and
liked
dolphin.
Beelzebub.
It's a good series. It did not have the greatest ending. It got rushed. But otherwise, as a whole, good series. But uh, on the dolphin side of things, Hardboiled Cop and Dolphin, I think, is really interesting. And when it was first introduced, it was introduced with more of a uh, it was introduced with more of a humor like lens instead of mystery as much. It had mystery elements, but it was leaning into the gag side of things, which I mean is a kind of a staple of Tamura's writing. Um, but as of like halfway through, it started to make more of that pivot towards the mystery side of things to try and I think distance itself from the other gags. Because over the past year, given how many gag series were introduced into the magazine and subsequently how many gag series have ended because there were too many gags, I think that the pivot that it's been making has been good. Because it's exploring this underwater cult and the different like ocean gangs, and it's really weird to say ocean gangs, but there are ocean gangs, and uh, exploring the fact that the dolphin cop wasn't always a dolphin. So that being said, um, I would personally rank this one, and it's going to be weird to say this as a series that I love, but in terms of the world building, I would put it as at a high C right now, just because they're finally starting to explore it more. Despite the fact that prior to that, they were they were leaning more into the gag side of things than the actual world building, but it's getting there. Um, and the stuff that they have done has been interesting. So that's at least me. I would put it in a high C.
The
And then
Southside Dolphins.
Ronan, are you going to make this a 1 for 5? And have you not read?
I hate to do it to you, but I have not read
Oh,
this. There are
no,
only
that's
there are only a
fine.
couple of series on here that I haven't read or like just seen in any capacity, and this is one of them.
You guys are all making me cry. No, I'm kidding. It's one of those things where it's like I read every series in Shonen Jump just because it's all available. Like for the first time in history, once Yuna and the Haunted Hot Springs left the magazine uh last year, I want to say, or the year before that, was the first time that everything that was printed in Jump was available in the West. So I made it a point personally to start reading everything because it was available. But I get that that is not a realistic expectation to have everybody read everything. And given the premise, because it has a dolphin cop, it's not for everybody. So no, I completely
Well,
understand.
I'd rather nobody has read it than everybody has read it but hate it and just shits on it.
That is true in some regards. I mean, although one could also argue that sometimes indifference is worse than not having uh, a polarizing opinion, but I'll take it.
Axel, I think you're missing like a golden opportunity here. You're the only one in this call that's read it. So you could suddenly just remember something about the world building that brings it up to S tier, and we'd be none the wiser.
I
I
could,
think you're missing.
but for the
And
sake of
that one chapter
transparency,
with the Southside Dolphins, that was just
Yeah,
basic world building. Oh boy.
literally.
the one
Turned
chapter
out
with
that the
all of the
dolphin
fan
used to be a
service.
gangbanger.
I mean, again, there are so many really great elements to it, but it hasn't explored it enough yet. So for the sake of transparency on my channel, I will put it as a high C for the sake
Uh,
All right.
for the sake of
before we move
transparency.
on, I'd just like to give props to a series that isn't on here and actually is a Shonen Jump title, No Rise of the Yokai Clan, which I've been reading recently. A really good series. I recommend you all read it. But if it was on this list, I'd probably put it A tier so far. Actually, nah, I'm sucking his stick a little too much. B tier.
That's fair. I haven't read it myself, so I was just like, all right, I can only afford to put like one or two things on this list that I haven't seen, because it would be really bad as the host to have things on my list that I have not seen or read. So,
I would
but
make you
I have
look
heard
bad.
good things.
Yeah, it's really good.
All right, boys. That brings us
Uh,
to the Dragon Ball block.
Hmm.
And I thought it would be best to separate them.
mhm.
But if there's a consensus to group them instead, that is an option. But I thought, just given how we've done Naruto and Boruto separate, I thought that like having them separate would be good too. So, any thoughts on keeping them separate, or should we join them all together?
I
Oh,
think
I haven't read or watched
separate.
Super, so
Dragon Ball Super can definitely stay away from the other. that can stay.
That's
Yeah.
That can stay isolated.
Not like it adds much. Well, kind of, but not anything good.
Yeah, I feel like for Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, we can kind of talk about those in the same vein.
yeah, yeah.
But with Dragon Ball Super, it is like a completely different feel. So I feel like we can address that on its own.
Yeah.
fair enough. Then I guess in that, well, the only thing that I would say, in the sake of still keeping Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z separate, is
Mhm.
that Dragon Ball Z just took the series and completely put it on its head in terms of contextualizing how it fits in the world.
That's true.
Because like Dragon Ball, like obviously we didn't think that there were aliens. We just thought that there were different races, monsters, demons, humans, fantasy, and sci-fi. So I guess, at least me personally, I'd probably still keep it separate. But
Mhm.
all right. Well, I think that being said, though, um, I think we can kind of talk about them as a whole, but still rank them
Yeah.
separately.
Yeah.
So that being said, I can kick things off in this regard. Um, of the three, I would probably, I think I would rank Dragon Ball the highest over all three of them, just because Dragon Ball as a world was incredibly interesting, in my opinion. Like, and that being said, Dragon Ball as a manga completely reshaped the world of shonen manga. That is just a historical fact. Because prior to
Mm.
Dragon Ball coming around, everybody was just like, "Oh my God, Fist of the North Star! We need to make a Fist of the North Star clone," and that's technically how JoJo was originally created. But I digress. We'll get to JoJo later. But Dragon Ball as a whole, I thought was really interesting because it merged the worlds of fantasy and sci-fi together very well, which is not a feat that can be done um, by everybody. Some people have even issues with creating one or the other successfully. Cough, cough. Samurai 8. But I digress. Um, Dragon Ball I thought was really good because as a whole, like seeing all of the different creatures, characters, and whatnot interacting with each other was great. You had Emperor Pilaf, you had the Red Ribbon Army, you had King Piccolo, you had the various martial arts tournaments, the various places around the world that Goku and the gang would travel to, and it was all really interesting. Not to mention the afterlife stuff that they had too. I thought was really cool. Um, so I mean, that being said, in terms of Dragon Ball, I would personally give it like low A, high B. Dragon Ball Z, I thought was really good, and like most people, Dragon Ball Z was what I got into first, just because that's how Toonami presented it. They had Dragon Ball Z before they had the rights to Dragon Ball, um, and it elaborated on certain things. Like it made it clear that Goku was a Saiyan, Piccolo was a Namekian. Um, but then the series just started to slowly but surely focus in on just select people in the Dragon Ball Z group. Um, and as the series went on, like yes, it started introducing more things. Like it introduced like the Kais. It introduced like that there were other planets and whatnot out there. It introduced Majin Buu. Um, but like it just was not, I think, as good as Dragon Ball. And then Dragon Ball Super is just like, hey, there's a multiverse now. Cool. Yeah. Just introducing things that were just like, okay, there's just a lot of stuff, but all the beam struggles, all the Goku focus. So I think I would rank Dragon Ball the highest at low A, high B. Dragon Ball Z at like a B, maybe even high C. And then Dragon Ball Super a C or a D, personally.
Mhm.
Ronan, what are you thinking?
Okay, so I disagree a little bit on some of those things, right? So for one, it's kind of hard, just like with Boruto, just like with kind of like Burn the Witch and Bleach. I think it's kind of hard to differentiate sequels from each other, especially when Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z are honestly not even sequels to each other. Like they're marketed as such, right? Obviously, there's a Dragon Ball Z anime, but like the manga is just Dragon Ball, right? So I'll assess it on like two separate levels. Like I'll assess it like as three separate things. Let me just get this out of the way. If Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z are the same thing, they're a continuation, it's A for me for sure. If they're different, it gets a little bit more dicey, right? Dragon Ball by itself is pretty good. I like the world. It's wacky. It's interesting. And one thing I think Toriyama does pretty well is, make it interesting for you, right? Like give you some like just some nuggets of information while being just vague enough to the point where you cannot really count it, like catch him in like a contradiction. That's one thing I think is beneficial. So for like things like Goku being a Saiyan in Dragon Ball Z, I think that's done pretty well because everyone knows Goku's weird, right? Even in Dragon Ball, he has a tail, he turns into a great ape. But since there was no explanation, since Toriyama didn't lock himself down in like this very hard, like form of just characterizing the world, I think it works to Dragon Ball's advantage. So I definitely say for me, right? I think Dragon Ball, just Dragon Ball, right, is a B, yeah, a B below Death Note. Dragon Ball Z for me is a B above Burn the Witch. And the reason for this is because of the expansion on a lot of the history of the Saiyans, of Frieza, Cell. One thing I like that they do is they bring back the Red Ribbon Army for an entire arc with the androids and Cell and all that stuff. And I think Dragon Ball does pretty good at connecting its themes and its world building going hand in hand, right? Obviously, you have the whole Saiyan thing of nature versus nurture, is like someone born at a high class in the Saiyan hierarchy, which I think is done pretty well, just better than someone who's low class but kind of raised on Earth. And I think the meshing of those is done really well, and I would say that definitely. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, it's probably the best B for me. Dragon Ball Z in specific being above Chainsaw Man for world building for me personally. When it comes to Dragon Ball Super, woo. It does a lot good. I will say. I like Beerus, right? I like Whis. I like these more like adding a little bit more to the deities. But I don't think it's been handled well enough, right? I don't think it's been like really delved into depth the way I think it should. So I think it's all right. It's okay. I definitely say it's like a C below that of like Bakuman and Demon Slayer. Even Assassination Classroom, I'd probably just put it in C, like the lowest of C tier. Not because it's particularly bad, but when you separate it from Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, it doesn't, in my opinion, have that much to offer us.
Yeah, that's fair. And I when you mentioned the manga side of things, I was just like, oh, that's right. Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z were technically the same series in terms of the manga, so you are correct. I think viewing it in that kind of lens is definitely a correct way to look at it. So I think that changes my perspective to put them in as a whole in a or B myself. So yeah. All right. King, are you still there? It's your turn if you have any thoughts.
I don't really love pissing off Dragon Ball fans. Not today. Gonna put it all in B tier and skip over me because my connection is kind of wacky right now. I'm gonna try to fix it.
All right. Well, then we will go to Tay next.
Yeah, I think I do agree with putting them with regards to Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. I do agree with putting them more closer together. I would actually go as far as to put them both in A tier. Because like it's like going back to what we said about Boruto. Boruto just feels like, so you had all of the foundations that Naruto laid, and then Boruto they just sort of stacked loads of pebbles on top, and it feels really shaky. But with Dragon Ball, it's like they traced along the lines, and it just continues and continues. And like I think when you look at it like that, like you have Dragon Ball, which did the walking so that Dragon Ball Z could run, and it's we also can't forget that like you said, um, like Dragon Ball basically laid the blueprint for these big, expansive shonen worlds. Like no one had done that before, and I feel like that's something that we can't forget about. Um, like we love like Naruto's and My Heroes, etc. But they all had all of these previous series to learn from, whereas Dragon Ball didn't have too many to like reference off of and that kind of thing. If you know what I mean. So I would say it's they would both go into an A for me, and with Super I'll just abstain because I haven't watched or read it.
That's fair. And then how about you, Tron?
Um, so for me, I'm also kind of having another issue separating world building from character moments because in terms of just purely expanding on the lore of Dragon Ball, I don't think that there's too much of that in the series in general, but I think that the world of Dragon Ball perfectly fits the characters and the story that Toriyama's trying to tell. Um, I think I'd put Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z both in A tier for world building, but for Dragon Ball Super, I don't know what exactly it was about it, but it just didn't feel like Dragon Ball. I don't know why that is, but something about it was always just weird to me. There weren't a lot of stakes in it, or it didn't feel like there were stakes. The characters weren't really super invested in the story in a weird way. But in terms of purely world building, I feel like all Dragon Ball Super did was just let's add more. It didn't really have any nuance to it. Like the whole idea of having these multiple universes, it's like, so how can we make the world even bigger? Let's just say this is just one of the many universes and that there's more. And now there's a multiverse. It's like it didn't actually do anything too nuanced or anything that impressive in terms of world building. I put Dragon Ball Super by itself in probably bottom of C.
All right, then I think with that in mind, like everybody said, we'll put Super at the bottom of C, and then we'll put both Dragon Balls in A. So, I guess that being said, do we rank Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z higher than Black Clover or lower than Black Clover?
Um, so this is the thing for me, right? I think that if we're talking about lore and anything in that regard, Dragon Ball doesn't hold a candle to Black Clover. But in terms of the plot perfectly meshing with the world, I think that they're pretty on par. So I think that Black Clover probably takes the edge over Dragon Ball.
So for me, if we're counting them as a whole, Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, I think it's kind of hard for me, right? Because like Tokyo Tron said, like in terms of just straight up lore, Black Clover is kind of running circles around Dragon Ball Z. It's not particularly bad for Dragon Ball Z in that aspect, but Black Clover just really dives into it in a way that not too many other shonen do, especially one as old as Dragon Ball, right? But where I do think Dragon Ball takes the edge, right, is where the themes play into the history and heritage that Dragon Ball has. Like I kind of mentioned, like the whole like nature versus nurture theme that the Saiyan arc does have, it not only acts as building for the Saiyan race, it acts as setup for the Frieza arc, which then in turn acts as setup for the future Trunks arc and then the Android arc. And I just think the only arc that I think is kind of disjointed from the rest is like the Buu saga. But I think in basically every other arc of Dragon Ball Z and just Dragon Ball as a whole, they're able to flow into each other in such a natural way just based off of the world that they take place in that I'd have to say for me personally, they like I can't even rank one above the other. I feel like they're the same in terms of quality, just one does something different, right?
Yeah, no, that's fair. Um, this might be weird to say, but do we want to make a Dragon Ball Black Clover sandwich then? Just put like let's just
Yeah, with
put
like Dragon Ball around it and then Dragon Balls. Yeah, I think that works.
yeah, there we go. I think Dragon Ball Black Clover sandwich that I think that sums up things nicely there. So, all right. Then since Tay mentioned it and I realized where it is, let's talk about Dr. Stone next, since that is technically where we're supposed to go next alphabetically. Um, who would like to start on Dr. Stone?
I can if no one else wants to.
Go for it.
So, with Dr. Stone, I think actually I shouldn't have said that I wanted to start because it's a difficult one. It's like it kind of goes back to like what we said about um Bakuman in this. It's kind of where would you say the world building is? Because like we don't there. It kind of lays itself in a way that it can't bring too much world building, but it kind of does it well. Hmm. I do like the fact that when did someone say something?
No, you're good.
Oh, um, I really love when we do get those little ingots of world building, but it's not really a focus. But like when we learn about how there was that separate civilization on the what did they call it again? Treasure Island, where like the samurai guy had got turned to stone about 100 years before Senku and the rest of the gang all woke up. And I think there is a lot to be explored as we get closer towards the end of the series of Doctor Stone. Like I think it does have very clever ways of introducing new characters that that would have been hard based off of the blueprint that the show is set on, with everyone being in stone. But um, I I I really like it, so I'd probably be biased, but I would say it's like a B because it sets itself to certain constraints, but it does well to work within those parameters, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. All right, Tron, what do you think?
So for Dr. Stone, I think that it's kind of hard to judge because, as Tay was saying, a lot of the stuff about really what happened and really how the world works is going to be revealed as we get closer and closer to the end. But besides that, because I can't really just assume the explanations we'll get, I think that the world building is somewhat bland. Because at the end of the day, the whole point of Dr. Stone, with it becoming a stone world and Senku trying to remodernize it, the world is supposed to almost serve as a blank canvas for the characters to build a new society on. And because of that, I'm not sure how much the actual world matters in terms of world building. But based on what we get towards the conclusion, it could go up or down. I think that I would probably put it, I think top of C tier.
Gotcha. I think Kay brings up an interesting point because it is hard to contextualize necessarily world building in Doctor Stone because in a sense, Doctor Stone is all about world rebuilding. Because
Mm,
obviously at this point, like we know that over I think it was 3,700 years have passed
yeah.
since the world turned
So
to stone.
700.
Right. And which leads to very, 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 very bad connotations about the village that has survived since then. So sorry for anyone that ruins that for Dr. Stone for him, but I digress. Um, the thing that really interests me is that we're seeing remnants of this world from millennia ago. The world that they're all from, as they're trying to rebuild it. And as they explore outside of their village, as they explore the world, um, we get to see so much more about how the world has changed and how they have to adapt to overcome things and whatnot. Um, so in that regard, it's been absolutely interesting to see how these different corners of the world have been working and how they've structured their society and whatnot, if they have a society. Um, so for me personally, I I would put Dr. Stone as a high B personally, just because it's been absolutely interesting to see how they're attempting to rebuild the world while overcoming how the world has changed in the span of time that they've been encased in stone. Ronan, what are your thoughts?
Okay, so it seems that I have the very, very unpopular opinion when it comes to Dr. Stone here. So here's what I'll say, right? Dr. Stone for me is like an S, right? And I know based on just the
An
argument,
S.
yeah. Let me
Oh no, I
explain.
enjoy Dr. Stone too, so like as a series, I also consider it that high, but please go on.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
okay.
100%. I
So
thought you were saying
no.
you're saying the world building's an
I am
S.
saying the world building's an S, right? I think. Listen. So I understand the point you're bringing up, right? The world is a blank canvas for the characters to paint on, right? The world is kind of determined by the characters, and as such, the world building is not something that drives the characters, but vice versa. I think that this is this is a relatively unique thing that I don't think very many series do. Even series that may be argued to be other S tiers in terms of their world building. Best-selling shonen ever. I don't even think that
Nah.
series does this in the way that Dr. Stone does. I think that almost purely based off of the unique way that Dr. Stone goes about literally building back the world and showing some of the struggles that characters have, some of the like ideological things that tie into the actual world itself. I think that Dr. Stone is able to do this really well, right? The mysteries that I think unfurl throughout this world are highlighted and emphasized by the way that they were able to shape it around them. For example, when we see that characters in Dr. Stone have conflicts, when we see that they argue against each other, they aren't just fighting with science versus brute force. No, they're literally fighting with the old world versus the new. And I think that's pretty, I think that's just for me a very amazing way to like combat each other on an ideological, philosophical, and like physical level. Having one character literally think that the way that the world is now is perfectly fine, and they're transforming or they're trying to preserve the world, whereas we have Senku and all the other like protagonists of the series fighting to get the old world back. They're trying to revert the world to what it was once, or what it was. I can't even say that. What it once was is what I'm trying to say. Whereas we have the antagonists, the antagonistic forces trying to keep the world in its kind of almost pure state. For me, that may just be a me thing. That may just be something that appeals to me. But I think that just due to how unique it is and to how just well I think it ties into the themes and ideas that Dr. Stone is trying to push, I'd say for the context of that series, it's an S tier.
Yeah, no, I think you contextualize that really well. And like I agree. Like I think that does deserve to rank highly. And King Uzumaki looks like his signal dipped out there, so we don't necessarily know what he would think. But I think with that being said, then, if we're talking how to rank these as a whole, I think I think I would be comfortable putting this at the lowest point in A to try and
Even it out.
meet the yeah, to kind of average things out. Because I would definitely rank it
I
highly
can agree with
myself.
that.
Um, I want to add one thing about Dr. Stone is like the one thing that I do have to give Dr. Stone's credit for in terms of world building is obviously without the world there is no Dr. Stone. Like the plot wouldn't happen, the story wouldn't exist. But
Hmm.
it's kind of hard to differentiate and compare it to world building on a more traditional aspect. I think just because of what Dr. Stone is trying to do.
Yeah, no, it is like you said, it is very different compared to the worlds where like any other world where it's just already established, or they're establishing things as they go, compared to Dr. Stone, where it's just like, hey, remember that world that you used to knew? Like, no, it's not there anymore. It's all Stone World now. So I see King is back, maybe temporarily. King, do you have
Yeah, I'm here to stay.
all right, do you have thoughts on the world building of Dr. Stone? Because you might tip the scales here.
Hmm. Well, I'm an anime only, but I do know some stuff that happens later on in the manga, and right now my thought process is like yours and Ronin. So, uh, hmm, just like I don't know, just the idea of just starting from square one all over again is just fascinating to me. So I'm gonna give it a.
All right. And I guess with that
I like
being
to say
said,
also, like, Dr. Stone feels like the most unique isekai. Like, I don't know if you guys would class it as like an isekai, but I kind of would. And it's like it's the only isekai where there's like nothing to go on in, well, sort of nothing to go on in the world that the characters have been thrown into.
no, it definitely does seem like an isekai, because in a sense they are reincarnating in another world. So I mean,
A reverse isekai.
kind of, yeah.
Uh,
So all right. Well, with that being said, then we moved from one Riichiro Inagaki series to another Riichiro Inagaki series, because the next one that we got on the list is Eye Shield 21, which is
I
another
thought that
series
was
that I hold near and dear to my heart.
I thought
Um,
that was by Yusuke Murata.
he did the art, but Riichiro Inagaki is
Oh,
the author for both Eye Shield 21 and Doctor Stone, and then Boichi does the art for Doctor Stone.
and he got good artists.
Yeah, right. Like both times, it's just like knocked it out of the park. So, uh, Tron, do you have any thoughts on Eye Shield 21? Tron?
Oh, sorry, I was muted.
Oh, oh, you're good.
Yeah, I have to abstain. I haven't read it.
All right, then we immediately go to my opinion. I think Eye Shield 21 is freaking amazing. S tier, no. I mean, as much as I think that Eye Shield 21 is an S tier series, um, I think that compared to other sport series, it definitely has one of the more interesting universes. Because compared to other sports series where like you'll have, like the typical school name like for like the different prefectures and whatnot, and you'll have um usually like more tame, like regular mascots and whatnot. Ice Shield 21 is just like, screw that. We're going to have these incredibly outlandish teams, incredibly outlandish characters belonging to these teams, very questionable things for the time that they were written. That just makes you kind of be like, oh no, why?
I know
But
what you mean.
yeah, it's one of those series where it's just like, parts of this are problematic in today's culture. But I digress. On the world building side of
Oh
things,
yeah,
for
weren't they saying something about like black people have superpowers or something?
Yeah,
Like
that.
very like
uh,
Japanese.
I
If
mean
he's
That
that's part of
that
black,
it,
he
but
rules the field.
they had a white coach being incredibly racist to his one black player on the
Oh
American
my
team.
gosh.
Not to mention the Egyptian team.
mm.
They're all Japanese, but like, yeah, it's one of those things where it's just like you look at it today and it's just like, oh, this is really problematic, but like it's still a really, really enjoyable
Well,
series.
cancel culture would be coming for that if it was
Uh,
I
still
mean,
if it was like an incredibly like mainstream
if it
I
got a
have a
manga.
very
reboot
dark sense of
today,
humor, so that's just fucking hilarious to me.
I yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love iShield 21. I still think a lot of this stuff is funny, but I do recognize it had very problematic parts. But
The
that being
dance.
said, in terms of the world building, on top of everything that goes on in Japan with the Japanese teams and whatnot, there's a lot of stuff that ties into America because that's where American football originated, and that's where the legend of iShield 21 came from, and how iShield 21 is here in Japan, even though he's from Notre Dame in America, and
Mm,
eventually they finally have like a worldwide arc at the very end. But iShield 21 as a whole, the world is so interesting. The characters are so cool. You want to be a part of it. Um, I would definitely rank iShield 21 as a high A, if not a low S tier, because I love iShield 21. Um, so yeah, Ronan, do you have any thoughts on iShield 21's world building?
All right, so I love the series, right? I only, interestingly enough, recently started watching, or not watching. I would never watch I Shield 21, the anime.
Oh my god,
Anyways,
please don't. The
I
anime
mean,
is so
I
bad.
mean, why would I watch an anime when I have the goat Yusuke Murata drawing the manga? I mean, come on now.
Exactly.
But I like the series a lot, right? It's probably a solid A just in general for me. And when it comes to world building, one thing I gotta say, yeah, it's actually, funnily enough, another one is coming right up. When it comes to sports, anime, and manga, since they're so heavily reliant on the characters, world building to me always seems to be a little bit on the back burner. This isn't to say that it has no world building. I think the incorporation of America and the different ways that they play is fine, I guess. But the thing is, I think it's also a little bit strange because while it does make an attempt to build the world, in my opinion, while it's not like personally offensive to me, like I understand as like it's just a manga, it's not really attempting to be offensive. I think it's building off of these like strange stereotypes that to me throw me off. Like they don't, like I said, annoy me or um offend me in any way. They just take me out of the immersion because I'll be seeing something like, you know, a Japanese person can never match up to the natural speed of a black man, and I'm like, okay, I guess. And it's just like,
Yeah.
and it's like that's whatever, right? I understand that's only a small part of the series. I'm not gonna judge it based off of that. But when a lot of your world building is reliant on Sena not being able to reach a certain level and having to use techniques because of stereotypes you're falling into, it doesn't do too much for the world building for me. So seeing as how is it just me and you, Axel Blaze, on that have seen it?
I don't know. King and Tay, have you read or watched it?
Yeah, I read
Nah,
it.
I haven't.
Okay, King Uzumaki ends. All right, so I'm still interested in seeing his opinion on it, but for me, I'd say it's probably like middle of the road C tier. Like I like the way that like they go overseas, they have their like different endeavors, but
Daggers in my heart.
yeah, I know, but like trust me, I love Ice Shield 21, but I don't think its world building is one of its strongest suits personally.
That's fair. All right, King, what are your thoughts on the world building?
Well, like I said, the stereotypes, they just cracked me up. Even though I guess I should be offended by it, I'm not. But, one thing about ISO 21, I don't know if it's just because it's the sport football, but just in general, like, it's so different from all the other sports anime. Because, like, if you look at something like, I don't know, Kuroko no Basket or Haikyuu, I'm not caught up on Haikyuu, by the way, but like, there's a lot of like, I guess you could say repetitiveness. It's different each time, but the same like kind of thing, like turn tournament. And the thing with Aisho, just it feels so different when you're reading it. And again, world building is not the main focus or the strong suit, but I think compared to like other sports anime where it's just like, oh yeah, they're just stuck in Japan, just gotta win the Winter Cup. I think it does it pretty uniquely. So I'd give it a A.
All right. Well, I think in fairness, then, to kind of even things up here, I'll put. I'm either gonna put it at the top of B or lower A, but I think to be fair, no, it's my list. I make the choice. I'm making an
Not wrong.
executive decision. We had 2 A's and a C, so
We
Fair
ran it
enough.
by the
Fair enough.
boss, and boss says,
like King and I just like high-fiving under the table right now, just like yes, put it in A tier. No, and the reason why I'm putting it like at the bottom of A tier is partly because we've got Haikyuu coming up next,
Yeah.
and I personally want to rate Haikyuu as a B tier, but I can't rate it as high as iShield 21 personally.
Okay.
So like I'll kick off the discussion on Haikyuu in that regard. I love Haikyuu. I think that the way that it's built up, the tournaments and whatnot, again, it's very character focused. But I do like one of the aspects of Haikyuu is that a lot of things in this story are built around the history of the small giant, and how that has impacted a lot of the different people in the different prefectures in Japan. Um, I also like the fact though that in the last season, in the last arc, there is that international focus, and we get to see how volleyball is played and appreciated around the world, whether that's standard volleyball or beach volleyball. Um, and I think that's a really cool aspect of it that would put Haikyuu in a B tier, compared to some of the other sports manga where they just keep things in Japan. I appreciate that fact that it decided to branch out a little bit. Ronan, what are your thoughts on Haikyuu?
All right, so I'm kind of known as a Haikyuu stan, right? Like Haikyuu is probably definitively my favorite sports manga, right? Just I mean, in the span of a couple of months, I feel like I've read the series 3 or 4 times, right? So I definitely do like the series. I kind of have a similar thing with like iShield 21 in the sense that it is a sports manga, so world building is not its forte, that's not its focus. But when building the world of volleyball, here's one thing I will say, right? Because if world building is simply the contextualization of the world, I think Haikyuu actually does it surprisingly well and maybe like better than some people would suspect. Because believe it or not, volleyball, like while popular in terms of like it's known, isn't really like, or at least before, it wasn't like a majorly loved series that people were just like, yeah, you know a lot about volleyball. But I think IQ actually did a pretty decent job in introducing people who had no idea about volleyball into the world of volleyball, and not only quickly, but seamlessly and without it being boring. Like, whenever they were talking about different strategies in Haikyuu, different ways to attack the net or defend, even though I had no idea what they were talking about initially, as it went on, I started to learn more and more about the world and actually started to enjoy the multi-layered setup. So for me, even though it doesn't do its traditional hopping around all over the place, and although it does do that towards the later arcs, I think I'd say it's an A tier, right? I'd say it's probably like just a really it to me it's the pinnacle of what a sports manga can do with world building, and almost a sports manga can do with anything.
Oh, that's fair. Haikyuu did for volleyball what Slam Dunk did for basketball in Japan. Both of them
yeah.
had a really big impact on people signing up for the sport in real life. So, like culturally, yeah, Haikyuu is definitely big. So,
Yeah, I think I saw in a video one time, like, in the year that the manga first started serializing, and in the year that the first season dropped, Japan's like volleyball um participation at school level like skyrocketed so much.
yeah, I think it went up like by 40%, I think.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
Somewhere
crazy.
between 10 and 40%, but it was big.
Uh,
All right. King, what are your thoughts on the world building in Haikyuu?
okay, so me and Haikyuu, we have a weird relationship where I like Haikyuu, I like it a lot, but I also love shitting on it just because seeing the fans' reaction is just priceless. But
You're gonna break Ronan's heart. You're gonna do it. Don't do it. Don't
Gonna
break
break
his
my
heart.
heart too.
You're being a little mean to one of my favorite series, buddy.
Treading on some thin ice here.
Some
Choose your
pretty
next
nice.
words carefully, King.
All right, I got you. So, anyway, yeah, the world building of Haikyuu is just fucking sucks, man. Like, it's just so bad. Okay. Relax, Ronin. It's just a joke. B tier.
All right, Tay, what are your thoughts?
Well, as a fellow Haikyuu stan, I've got your back, Ronan. Like with Haikyuu's world building, I think out of any series that we've mentioned so far, Haikyuu has the best world building for me personally. Like even though I'm an sorry, what?
Oh no. Continue.
No,
Please
keep going,
continue.
keep going.
Yeah, like even though I'm a anime only watcher for Haikyuu, like the amount that I've learned about the series from only the anime, like you learn so many different teams, you learn all their different play styles, you learn so much about the tactics of volleyball, like even to the point where it's like different coaches have different preferences. Like um when Hinata in at the beginning of season 4, when he wanted to try and sneak into that like district training camp, and that particular coach from Shiratorizawa, he only really likes like big players. Like I'm a massive sports fan in general, so like there's a lot of like different coaches in sport that have like preferences when it comes to players, when it comes to tactics, and to see that implemented into a series where it's a manga, like you don't expect him to showcase that extensive of a knowledge of the sport in general, but like the amount that you learn about the sport, and also even all the different ways that they implement like the nationals, like with Tobio getting invited to like the youth Olympics set up and like the academies and stuff like this. I think the world building for Haikyuu is like so top tier. To me, I would honestly put it at an S personally.
All right. That's a
Defend
very strong
Haikyuu. Let's
opinion.
go.
You said what?
I just said, it's always great to see Haikyuu appreciation, you know?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, you guys got enough of that.
I mean, I will say, and while I did rank it lower, that is not to say that I don't like Haikyuu, because I absolutely love it. Haikyuu is one of my favorite series. I gave my reasons for the ranking, but I want to hear what Tron has to say. What are you going to say to determine where this lands, Tron?
Okay, so here's my thing with Haikyuu, right? At the end of the day, it's just volleyball. And we can't, because it's just volleyball, we can't expect some of the things that we get from other series because that's not what it's about. Like, it's really hard to compare them, but I will say that the world perfectly allows for the character building. And I recently binged read all of Haikyuu. I got hooked after the end of season 4, primarily because of the fact that the Inarizaki match was so good for a team that didn't really have that much build up in terms of their relations to the characters. Like it wasn't like Alba Josai or Shira Torizawa in that sense, but it was still a really fantastic match. And because the world allows for the character dynamics and backstories and everything to be so good, I would have to give Haikyuu top of S tier.
Ooh, hold on.
Top
Wow,
of
Do I
I
S
need
feel
tier.
to
like
do I need
the
to
black sheep
reevaluate
here.
Oh
my
yeah,
my
my
ranking for
guy, my
Haikyuu? I
guy.
like it.
I was not
Yeah,
expecting that. That was great. Oh
because
my
also
gosh.
like something I forgot to mention is like if you obviously like Tokyo said or like Tron said, like it is just volleyball, right? So you gotta rewire the way you're looking at it. And so for something like let's just say Naruto or Jujutsu or anything like that, right? I would consider like the different ways that people fight as part of the world building, like the different ways that cursed energy is used or chakra is used or so on and so forth. And I think it goes the same for Haikyuu, and like the different play styles that different players have. Like Hinata is not a he doesn't have an extensive game knowledge, but he's really athletic and he's really fast. And then you've got someone like Tobio who's like he's just a genius at the game, and like the different players do have the different play styles, and I think that that can correlate to like how a fighting style would be in a fighting manga. And also like they could easily just stick to like playing high school matches and we like episode to episode, chapter to chapter, and like not bother learning like doing much more. But it's more like you learn so much about like the industry of like youth volleyball is what I wanted to say. So that justifies my S tier a bit more.
At an
All
S
right,
tier
boys.
ranking for Haikyuu.
Let's go.
I hope so.
Let's go. Let's do it. Let's just piss off the Demon Slayer fans
and
even more.
now
by
the
putting
thing is, the
Haikyuu in
crazy
S
thing
tier.
is, we're
Oh
about to
my
hit a
gosh.
line of manga that are pretty fire. So this is gonna be interesting.
Yeah, we are about to get into the real meat and potatoes of Shonen Jump. And that being said,
Yeah,
we're
before
starting.
we move on, I just say something like at this point, this is even, nah, I'm not gonna shit on Haikyuu. This doesn't even feel like a video anymore. I feel like I'm just chilling in Discord talking about world building now. I like that.
Fully,
I mean,
I
that's
like,
didn't
more or
really
less
like
like
how
what
long
what
has
just
this video been
happened,
recording
but
for at this point?
yeah.
this has more or less been just a 2.5 hour shoot the shit.
This is more like a podcast.
Well, I mean, this will fit my podcast slot on a Friday. So
Oh, I
say
thought it
that.
was just a video, not an actual podcast episode.
I knew this was going to be super long, so there was no way this was going to fit into like the regular like Monday, Wednesday slot for me. So no, this is going to be a podcast episode. Just given how long that it is.
You know what's
Oh
funny is the
shoot.
fact that like when you asked last night, like, oh, does anyone have any questions on Discord? I was fully typing how long are you planning on filming for? Like just out of curiosity. I've not got anywhere to be. But like I'm glad I didn't ask now because I can't imagine what estimate you would have said.
I mean, in all honesty, I was going to say anywhere from like 1 to 4 hours. Like one on like the really, really everyone has like a word to say end of things, but like no, I knew this was potentially going to get long, especially if we had more discourse. So yeah,
I think we've I think we've been going for almost 2 hours now, right?
yeah, we have.
All right, you guys ready to talk about hiatus x hiatus?
Not me. I'm not on that either. I'm afraid. I haven't read that either.
Another
Again, going back to like my
classic.
Bleach. Huh?
Another
Again,
classic.
but like I'm saying, Ronan, like I'm saying again, it's I want to give it the time it deserves. Would you rather me just like I could have easily like binge watched Hunter x Hunter since finding out about like us doing the video last week and like tried to rush in and then I wouldn't have like my thoughts,
Nah, you
properly
spin. You
in
spin.
order about the series.
Some of these series definitely need their time to just understand and just soak it in. I do agree. I do agree. I'm just saying. Man, it hurts to get attached to Hunter x Hunter though. It hurts. It hurts.
It does.
I did watch a few
Thankfully,
episodes the other day and like in the very, very limited amount of episodes I watched, like single digits, like I learned a lot about like the world of hunters, like the different types of hunters, like what's the word? Like the aptitudes, like you got like bounty hunters and treasure hunters, etc. And then you got like the
that's
phantom
just
troop
the
and stuff.
tip of the
But yeah,
iceberg.
that's the input I will give.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the input I'll give. I'm glad I could, you know,
When it comes
explain
sorry.
Haikyuu, explain Hunter x Hunter to you guys.
When it comes to Hunter x Hunter, this one for me is one where this is an easy S tier, in my opinion, because Hunter x Hunter has this such an immersive world with everything that they have, like with the hunters, with the phantom troops, with the chimera ants, with what little we have so far of the dark continent. There is so much in Hunter x Hunter that is absolutely fantastic that like for me, I I couldn't I couldn't personally list it as anything lower than an S. But I definitely want to hear what everyone else has to
Okay.
say. So Tron sounds like he has an opinion on
So yeah, so I definitely am very alone on this opinion, but I don't really like Hunter x Hunter that much. I
I got you, bro.
yeah,
I got you.
no. I won't like I can't say it's a bad series because objectively it's not a bad series. Um, but for me there's a lot of aspects that I really just don't enjoy from it. I think at least as much as other people do. Um, I know this is just world building, but one thing that I've always thought about that I really didn't enjoy that much was this is gonna be a pain for everyone. Meruem versus Netero. Okay, so when I was told to watch Hunter x Hunter, I was told this is like top one fight, all of manga, all of anime, just ever. I like the fight. I like the like philosophical messaging of the fight where Netero doesn't want to kill Meruem because of Meruem's more of an individual than just a monster and how their roles are kind of switching. But in terms of the actual like choreography of the fight, I didn't really think it was anything special. But as for world building, I can't even though I don't really enjoy Hunter x Hunter, I still have to give it S tier. And the point where it became S tier was probably I think during the like mini isekai arc in Hunter x Hunter, the fact alone that that
Bleed
exists
Island.
in the world, it's just yeah, that just makes it so massive and there's just so much potential. And then with what we're seeing in the manga now, I can't not give it an S tier.
All right, Ronan, how about you?
All right, so here's what I'll say, right? If the power system that many people use is part of the world building, then I mean, I don't think I need another reason to put it in S besides Nen. Like, what? Like, bro, the variation, the variety, the diversity of all these power sets and abilities that like hundreds, if not thousands, of people can use across the verse is insane. You have things tie in, like for example, we'll see like setups like I don't know, like just Killua being immune to lightning, right? Like things in the world, right? Killua being immune to lightning because of his family ties then leads to something later in the series. I won't spoil, obviously, but leads to something later in the series that's big. That's like the thing about Nen contracts and all these things all culminate into being just this like it to me. It just Hunter x Hunter is probably out of all the ones we've dealt with so far, just the most tightly knit and sound in terms of like its world building. Like to me, if I were to look for it purposefully, I wouldn't be able to find gaps in the world building and contradictions because either it's so like airtight that I can't find anything, or it would be a stretch to call any one of these things a contradiction. So for me, I'd have to say world building and everything about the Hunter x Hunter universe is just S tier.
All right, then that leaves you, King. What are your thoughts?
Well, like Sean, I like Hunter x Hunter. I I know it's a good series. I can't deny that. Personally, I enjoyed Togashi's other work, and in my opinion, his better work, Yu Yu Hakusho, a lot more. But yeah, I don't even think it's arguable at this point. The world building is S tier, and when it comes to the net power system, I mean it's an amazing power system. But I have a question for everyone in this call. Can you tell me that you completely, 100% understand the system?
I
I
mean,
don't think anyone can.
one thing about Nen that I will have to say is like so okay, so first off, I really appreciate the idea of Nen contracts and how there's like a specific give and take with that. But in terms of Nen as a whole, again, not trying to sidetrack the conversation too much, but I don't necessarily think it's as special as some people make it out to be. I think it's a good power system, but I think that it could be seen in a sense that it's so vast with whatever you can do with it in terms of abilities that it's not even really a power system at all.
More like
Like that's
magic,
kind of wild
kind
to
of.
say, but what I mean is like so we have series like Dragon Ball. Everyone says no power system Dragon Ball, it's just key. But you have like individual species and people that can use different abilities. And to me, I kind of see Nen as that. Like, there's not really anything that's too unified besides the basics.
To me, like I understand that, right? Nen has so many different possibilities that Togashi could really make any ability, and because of how he set up Nen, it makes sense because of it. Where I think Nen's strength lies is not in the specificity of the certain like the limitation. Well, it is limitations, right? I think the simple vast amount of strategy you can use, right, with simple abilities, right? Simple abilities like bungee gum, right? Literally just being stretchy and sticky is an ability that has allowed Hisoka to take out some extremely dangerous people, right? Like just by concealing it, making it invisible, right, and dealing with it, I think that's where it truly stands out. Just how diverse the fights can be. Whereas other power systems, just using Ki for example, right? At the end of the day, right? I'm not trying to oversimplify Dragon Ball, which I think is a symptom that I think the series suffers from. But at the end of the day, a lot of it comes to, you're able to exert a certain amount of power. You're either able to use that in your physical abilities or Ki, right? Sure, there are some outliers. You have things like time skip, you have other abilities, but 9 times out of 10, it'll come down to your techniques and your Ki blasts, right? And while it does make for an interesting spectacle, I think from like an intellectual standpoint, it's never like a it's never like like whereas like Dragon Ball is playing checkers. I think like Hunter x Hunter with Nen is always consistently playing like chess in terms of how can you outsmart your opponent using abilities and simple rules in the system that they aren't aware of or they aren't currently thinking about. But that's just my perspective on that.
Mm. But to me, this might all sound a little wild. To me, that just makes it seem like it's almost a gimped version of stand battles.
I mean,
Yeah, I
that
hear
is
the
a
two
contentious
compared a
debate that
lot.
we can have once we get to JoJo, because that is very close.
Yeah,
But,
I definitely do think
yeah.
stands and Nen are similar in terms of their quality of power systems, but we can talk about that when we get to JoJo's. You right?